Hey everybody, welcome to this week's What Kind of Internet Do You Want? Web3 Weekly Wrap-up. I'm Amy James.
And I'm Devin James.
And
Hi.
we are excited to be talking about this week's news. Some crazy stuff happened this week.
Lots of news, wowzers.
So, you want to kick things off?
Yeah, let's
Big
dive in.
story of the week, obviously.
Big story of the week. FriendTech, friend.tech, becomes massive ether money machine as NBA players FaZe Clan join in. So this was a fun one. We've seen slight variations on this in the past, something that kind of became DSO, did something kind of similar a few years ago. So let me just kind of go into kind of the details of it a little bit. It's being called the new crypto killer app, and this is primarily because it's been so successful so fast. Within a week, it had over 100,000 users, and it got to the is it second or third highest revenue? No, I'm sorry, second highest revenue over right behind Ethereum as far as all crypto mechanisms involved, and it really drove up Base because it's built on top of Base. For anyone that isn't familiar, basically the way it works is that it's a way to kind of monetize the size of your social media following, and it does something kind of cool that we've talked about over the years as we've kind of talked to content creators and social media people about what Web3 can do for them. Is it can, if you can do something where if you give someone access to a token and they get the token, then they can join you in a private chat. They can kind of get themselves exclusive access to certain things, whether it's content or whether else, just access to you.
And so it definitely was like probably one of the coolest features that it offered.
Exactly, and it was, and because you can do a lot with that. Basically, you can kind of build a what is the kind of almost porn OnlyFans kind of thing. You could basically kind of build your own OnlyFans on top of it, because if you give someone exclusive access to talk to you, you can share content with them in addition to just sharing yourself.
Makes sense.
So it kind of went through a few different stages. First, it was just the early adopters in crypto. You got folks like Kobe jumping on board, and he became just absolutely huge. He got up to, his profile was worth I'm sorry, what I didn't finish there is that, so then the owners of it actually get a share of the value that's moving through your particular friend.tech account kind of thing. The platform itself gets 10% fee is taken. The platform itself gets half of that, and your followers get half of that. So pretty cool. You get half of that, so you can share that with some of your followers. And then they get value basically because there's excitement about it, they can obviously flip it. So if someone discovers, an up-and-coming profile that's going to get really big, they buy it early, sell it late. And so the next stage of it was major kind of personalities and influencers and stuff like,
like sports people
and esports people, basically.
We're so sporty.
Yeah, very. And then lastly, what I just saw the other day was actually OnlyFans. Actually, literally OnlyFans accounts discovered this and figured, oh my God, this is kind of a wonderful way to monetize how big my following already is. So, fun. It went through a whole lot really quickly.
It dominated this week's
It absolutely
crypto
dominated,
news.
yes. Now, there's downsides to that, of course, because it's very likely that the SEC is going to come a knocking, because it's kind of overtly, breaking securities laws. You're selling like a share of this revenue stream that you're directly responsible for, creating the value behind it,
So I heard the argument that just because it's called a share doesn't mean that it is a share.
Yes, but they don't even call it a share anymore. They changed them to keys. And so someone's pointing out that, just because you call it this, it doesn't matter what you call it. It is what it is, regardless of what you're calling it, kind of thing. So it's very likely that they're watching. We haven't seen any actual indications from them that they have been. But just the way it works, how fast it blew up, the fact that kind of anyone can get involved. They're not limiting it to who can buy access to it, et cetera. You're very much investing in the future value of this particular thing. It seems pretty much like a security, or at least it could be possibly interpreted that way. We'll have to see. There's counters to that. We'll see. Some extra layers then kind of came out that there was kind of a data leak involved. Basically, someone scraped their public API and found basically the database that relates the crypto wallet address on Base with the user's Twitter X profile, and a fair amount of other private information. And then they just put that up on GitHub. They quickly took it back down because everyone's pushing back, but because FriendTech themselves say that the data is from their public API, so it's kind of like, and it's all just scraped directly from that. It's not like it was actually a leak of an internal database. Honestly, I don't know how they implemented it, but it doesn't seem to me like they needed it to be a public API. It could have, been limited to only, maybe your followers would get access to that. I don't know. So that just seems weak, and certainly a weak defense against it, especially because I don't think this makes the point, but they don't have a privacy policy yet. If you click on their privacy policy, it says, check out our privacy policy on our website, and there isn't any yet.
Oh,
so
my God.
That's a little janky, who knows?
So the thing to me about this story, and I would have said this before it even happened, is that crypto really does an amazing job of exemplifying that which goes up must go down.
Yes, very much so. Well, that's the last kind of detail that I wanted to include. You actually shared this with me this morning. Anyone that buys tickets to mainnet gets access to Masari's internal research documents and stuff like that, or pro research stuff. It's fantastic. Definitely use it. Buy it if you aren't already a mainnet visitor, because they make some great reports. But anyway, one of those things basically pointed out it's coming back down, just like everything else. And it's unfortunate because it's definitely the pattern within crypto that something that blows up exclusively, not because it's really easy to use or because it's got really long-term usefulness and stuff like that. It blows up because people see the opportunity to get rich quick. And they do. Early adopters of these things get rich quick, and because they're influential, they get other people to get on board, and, it's the greater fool theory or the greater simp theory in this case, who knows. So yeah, it's definitely coming back down. The hype is going away. It was beginning of the week that it was hypey, and here it is at the end of the week already, and it's starting to die back down. I know, it's just like 1 week, and it's gone down 40%.
From,
and 80% from their peak.
The higher, the other axiom. How do you say that word? Axiom. The higher you rise, the faster you fall, something like that. I think that's another thing that we see all the time in crypto. And I think that it's just like one of those things that is, it's the opposite of what we want.
Yeah.
And it's, for me, always so baffling because somebody told me that I tend to bury the lead, that I am so much more excited about the long-term and nerdy details of something than I am about the hype, that it can be kind of a problem in getting the message out sometimes.
I hear that. That's fair.
But this is just the opposite side of that there's certain people in crypto that are super good at the hype. They're incredible at setting up the economics of their system so that it will just go to the moon really fast.
Yep.
But when that happens, it inevitably...
Exactly.
And that has been happening for so many years now.
Right.
And it's giving people a bad taste, and it's giving crypto a bad reputation. And I think it's just super short-term thinking.
In fact, I think I actually even talked about this when we were talking about this at the beginning of the week. I was worried that there's no actual value going through the system. It's not like anyone's paying money in that then gets split between people. All the value comes from the fact that the hope, as number go up kind of thing, is that you're going to buy low and sell high, and then so you have an incentive to sell, and because you're selling, the platform takes a 10% cut, and then that gets split. So the parties involved only benefit when there's active trading, and the trading isn't just what if there's stasis? What if we get to a point where everyone feels like they have the profile that they want? Sure, that's never going to totally happen, but the point is, clearly, this was driven entirely by unrealistically high levels of hype, unsustainably high levels of hype, to where at the end of the week, it's no longer the very top story. Arrests happened, various other things happened in the industry, and because it's no longer the top thing, revenues are falling dramatically. So
yeah, this is, again, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, so on the plus side, setting up so that it's going to go to the moon really fast means that it's also going to capture the news cycle. It's going to become the talk of the town. You're going to even get people who I think wouldn't normally give something like this the time of day to get involved just because it is so hypey and exciting and driving the news cycle. On the other hand, most of the time, the economic dynamics that set that up so that it would go to the moon so quickly aren't the ones that are going to be meaningful long term.
Exactly.
And what you're talking about there is that because of the way that it was set up, where you're only making money if it's being traded, means that it doesn't make the creator, who really the economics should be designed for, because the creators are the ones that need the sustainable income over time.
Right.
And so if it was set up differently, it could be some sort of like subscription kind of thing where a creator is getting an ongoing source, an ongoing monthly revenue stream.
Right. One way to do that, what you're talking about, is they could expire at the end of a month or something like that. Now, I mean, the value of that one's going to probably go down near the end of it, but the next one comes out, and now you have to, your following needs to buy them all over again, kind of thing. That way, it's like a subscription. And so there's the demand is more based on the access you get to the person, and that has itself a market value.
That's right. It's more based on the meaningfulness of the product than, the hype machine. And that would also ultimately, over time, have a more benefit for creators, and that really is, I think, where we should be focused. But hey, what do I know?
Agreed. Yeah, no idea. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to our next little bit here.
All right. So this week, Lenster announced a very cool new feature, if you ask me. Again, something we have been dreaming about for a long time, and that is that you can select the algorithm that you want to use. And so they have a list of them, a sort of menu to choose from to get things started: recommended, popular, recent, and crowdsourced. But you're also able to, I believe, kind of create your own. And so this is just where we should be going in social media. You know, it's actually kind of the opposite of what we were just talking about with FriendTech, where they're thinking more long term in terms of the power of the networks being pushed to the ends of the network, the users having control over their unique preferences and settings and how they want to view and interact with content. And so this is just really exciting to see. I think that it could be something that a lot of other social platforms will integrate over time. It will obviously take time for it to catch on. Lenster, you did a review of Lenster, right?
Not so much a Lenster or a review of Lenster. It was learning how to publish content on LensTube, but they both had the same mechanic of you need to get a Lens profile to use it.
Okay, makes sense. So check that out. We can link that video in the comments if you want to find out. Like the trouble, I think, with Lenster and the LensTube that you're talking about is that there's kind of like a high barrier for entry. There's a lot of friction to get involved. And that...
Well, you can get lucky if you get the timing right. You get one for free and stuff like that, but most of the people don't, and so you have to, one, spend about $200, maybe down, maybe up, I don't know, but also learn how an NFT trading market works. That's definitely a high barrier of entry.
Yeah.
For social media.
The game theory of that can be good sometimes. You know, you'll see like dating apps where it's like exclusive entry, or they gatekeep it somehow. Back in the day, that's true. Yeah. That's true. So theoretically, it can work. I'm not sure if it's working for Lenster or LensTube or the Lens protocol. But the point really here is that this is where social media should be headed.
Agreed. One extra thing I would very much like to see is for a market of these things, because some of these you're looking at, I didn't actually realize you could turn on many. That's smart, because obviously you have a bunch of different buttons across the top, so you can actually you can switch back and forth just like you would on like Twitter or anything else between your most viewed and just the normal ranking. and then the rest of them that are added seem like they're relatively simple, designed, popular, recent. As people want to make kind of more convoluted ones that really kind of specialize in a particular type of sorting or filtering, they're going to put some work into that, and they should earn money for it, whether it's, buy it on a market or somehow earn a cut of something that's moving through it or anything else like that. Anyway, I absolutely love this. Especially now that X's profile or algorithm is open source, I would love to see X adopt the same kind of a thing where you can just install your own algorithms and decide how your feed should be sorted.
No,
Absolutely
that's
wonderful.
a fantastic point, that the more we can incentivize developers getting rewarded for the things that they build, the better Web3 will be, the more customization will be available to us. And so I just think, like, you're absolutely right. That would be amazing if there was some sort of way either for you to just like buy it outright, or for developers to like get paid a little bit every time it's there's a bunch of different ways that you could look at the economics of that for sure.
Let's move on to our next story here. This is an interesting one. I really dig this idea here. This guy, Alex Price, who's with A16Z Crypto, worked with Miramax and created a little short film to demonstrate a concept. We linked this particular tweet in the show notes, so you can watch it for yourself. I'm just going to go play a few seconds of it. He calls it spatial sign-in. The idea here is, as we're going to start using what Apple calls spatial computing, i.e. you wear, Apple's thing or whatever other VR headset and you interact with it in that way, there's different ways that you could do authentication. Instead of the thing you remember being just a series of letters and numbers, it can be... We have, like, our memory engrams are tied in such a way where we can remember experiences pretty specifically. So in this case, what we're seeing is this: in order to authenticate yourself, you grab certain objects, move them around, and put them in different places. So it's something that if someone wandered into your virtual house, they wouldn't necessarily understand that the doll being over here is part of your password and such and such. So it's a pretty cool idea. It really is, honestly. And with just a few different things, move this over here, move this over here, move this over here, move this over here, you've got a highly secure password. However, I can't let it actually play all the way through because I think it literally takes about 3 minutes before he finishes getting his password in, which is obviously untenable, right? But I would say it's a proof of concept. It's a very, very interesting new idea for how to do this kind of a thing, because password management is an absolute joke. We've been getting trained for 20 years by the web to not care about remembering your password. The number of people that I know that just don't really care about their password, they just click the forgot constantly. It's just insane. Password managers should be a solution to that, but they've become a security vector, either just because they're storing stuff on the cloud that isn't all that well secure, or you're storing it locally, and then your computer now has hopefully an encrypted version, in most cases, I think an encrypted version. But then there's also potentials for kind of edge leaks around it and stuff like that. So putting all your passwords in one place, it's a convenience. It's not necessarily secure,
Right, it's just like a massive honeypot.
Very much so, exactly.
Especially when they're all stored together, right?
Like exactly.
Not just all of mine stored together, but like all of a single app's users stored,
God,
right?
Even better. Yeah. So we definitely need to solve for this going forward, because more and more and more of our life is attached to our digital identity, and especially as virtual spaces and what do they call it again? Spatial computing becomes more and more of a thing. It's going to be more important for us to be able to authenticate ourselves in a usable way that is also reliable. So I like this as an idea. Clearly, if you had all the objects on your table and you just rearranged them, you could do it much faster, but that reduces the actual security involved. But I honestly, I really do like the idea. It's a fun little video to watch. They obviously spent a fair amount of money kind of making this. They fly through the metaverse and you see, various different NFTs and stuff like that. But I think more people will continue to experiment with this concept, because I very much like the idea. Something that is actually memorable, but just because you can remember it doesn't mean it has to be based on, it's not a repeatable password they're using with every single thing kind of thing. So I like it. We'll see if it kind of goes anywhere, if it inspires the next version that doesn't take 3 minutes to enter, et cetera. So
yeah, I mean, my take on this is when I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, I mean, I get why Devon likes this because the video is beautiful and you are, very influenced by that kind of stuff. Sure. Yeah. However, it's also something that is nerds only. For sure, right now, like Uber nerds only, and not actually going to be used by anyone. But you're right that that it's like one of those things where you kind of just like have to take one step and then take the next step and then take the next step and then 5 or 15 steps later it gets to the point where actually mainstream users are going to use it. Yeah.
So we'll see.
All right. Well, hopping over to some other Web3 news that is more markets focused, I suppose.
Sure.
I don't know.
Sure.
Crypto focused. Coinbase and Circle have joined forces even more officially than they have in the past because Coinbase acquired an equity stake in Circle and have redefined their roles in terms of managing USDC. So a little background on this for you is that Circle and Coinbase jointly managed USDC initially. They had what was a self-governance consortium, and they now are deprecating that sort of third entity. The third entity was called Center, and they're deprecating that because what they say is with growing regulatory clarity, it's no longer needed. So Center will no longer exist as a standalone entity, and instead, Circle will remain the issuer of UCSD and bring all of the governance and responsibility and operations responsibilities for USDC in-house. So it's just like an interesting... we're going to see these sort of waves of consolidation as the industry progresses. And this is, one of those that's kind of meaningful because it's two enormous companies. And the other thing, just to kind of put this in context, is that Circle is the second most popular stablecoin. So the first most popular, ironically, is Tether. The second is USDC, Circle's USDC. And then the third, but much by a significant margin lower, is DAI. DAI is arguably the most stable. I think factually the most stable, one. But it's also the most sort of transparent because it's code that's managing it, whereas these other ones have companies that are kind of doing things to manage it. Yeah. Let's see. The other things that I just wanted to talk about when it comes to this story is that I think people don't really get why stablecoins matter. I think that they think, oh, well, it's a way for me to be involved in crypto that limits my risk. So it's like I can be involved, but it's going to be a relatively stable asset, theoretically.
You're like using a wallet and doing all these crypto-related things, but it's got $1's value. So it might not go up, but it also won't go down. I'm going to always add the asterisk of theoretically, especially with what we've seen with some of them.
But and then some people will take that a step further and they'll say, well, the importance of stablecoins is for traders because traders need to have easy access to funds to take advantage of opportunities in the market, and moving funds from something like a fiat currency into a cryptocurrency can take days at times. And so you would miss those opportunities. So if you're able to just sort of keep those funds readily available, and then you can participate in those trades. So that's like level 2 in terms of why people think that stablecoins are important. But I would say the real alpha here is that they are important for infrastructure projects.
Oh, yes.
And the thing that people aren't seeing when it comes to that is, so let's say that I want to pay for some bandwidth, or I want to pay for some cloud compute. If I'm paying for that in a non-stable way, and that the token that's affiliated with that service has some sort of wild price swing because it does something crazy, like announce that it's the only marketplace where you can get access to the A100.
For example.
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead in stories. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
For example, it does something crazy. Well, then all of a sudden, I think that I'm going to have hours or days of the service, and now I have minutes or seconds. Like, that's a huge problem. And stablecoin payments will help to solve that. And so the necessity for infrastructure to have stable payments so that these services can switch behind the scenes for us, it's not something we're having to do as the users, and we're able to relate to the amount of money in a way that just makes sense to us. Like, that's what stablecoins give us when it comes to infrastructure. That's why they're really important for the future of Web3, ultimately to the average user like you and me.
Yep. I remember I've always theorized that most people, like, sure, the crypto nerds will remember, 5 or 6 different values in their mind about different tokens that they're excited about and stuff like that. But the vast majority of the public are, as they adopt this stuff, they're going to stick to a single reserve currency. And for a long time, that reserve currency is likely going to be not even Bitcoin necessarily, but a stable coin, because they're used to the value of the dollar. Obviously, like you said, like, they're sacrificing the potential of number go up kind of thing. But they're getting involved in the ecosystem. They're getting themselves access to be able to buy Bitcoin when it dips, or have access to all these various different kind of services and stuff like that, without having to overcomplicate in their mind what they're keeping track of. So at most, they might hold a stable coin and Bitcoin, for the most part.
No, you've argued this for a long time. We had a developer on our team for a long time who was convinced that we should be we should be measuring things in sats. Like,
it wasn't even sats, it was bits, which, who knows, anyone that's watching right now, tell me what a bit is, because it is in fact a measure of Bitcoin. But I have to look it up when, exactly how many, points past the decimal place it is.
And so it's like one of those things that it kind of like generationally, like, kind of helps, it bifurcates or there's like some sort of spectrum, right? So she was just like so internet native and so young, and she was a developer, and so there was just like all of these things stacking up to the point where she was just like, no, and a gamer, that this like made sense to her, whereas for you and me, like, I want to know what the dollar value is, because that's where my head goes.
To be honest, I think that was her primary argument, that it was actually bits are close to, because of the value of Bitcoin at the time, bits are close to about $1. It's that many decimals away. So a bit is about $1. It was in the dollar kind of range kind of thing. And so she was trying to solve that problem, get it close to something that we're used to. If a burrito costs $5, it should cost 2 or 3 bits or 8 or 9 bits. It shouldn't be 9,000 Satoshis. Like, that's something that people, or 1/1,000,000th of a Bitcoin kind of thing. That's not something people can keep track of. So that's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought about that, whether or not that, just because of how many decimals below the 0 Bitcoin can go, and that we've given names to many of those, if that can stand in for stablecoins in some way.
I was just going to say, so maybe that could work with, maybe that's the bridge, like stablecoins becomes the bridge to us talking about the units differently than dollars.
Yeah,
we will see.
I don't know.
We will see.
Yeah.
All right, what do you have for us next?
Well, in our next one, I kind of love this. I know a lot of the Web3 industry has been claiming for a number of years now that proof of work is nothing but destructive and really bad for the environment, et cetera. And it's a reasonable claim at its surface. But honestly, there's been a lot now written that just kind of demonstrates that this is a kind of a misunderstanding, that it's a lot more complex than that. Like, I've always used the analogy of like Ubers and Lyfts, that because an Uber and a Lyft driver, they don't get to set their own market price for the ride itself. It is, in fact, a free-floating market price determined. Generally, it's a worldwide kind of a standard, but it's going to vary a bunch within kind of the local environment and how much pressure there is at that moment in time. The point is, they don't get to actually set that price themselves. But they do have an ongoing cost. Whenever they do, take an actual ride, they're going to earn income at a given rate, but they're going to spend cost at a rate that they could take some control over. If they're just driving a normal gas vehicle and the cost of gas is very high, then that's their ongoing cost. If the cost of electricity would be lower and they want to get a hybrid so that it's going to actually be sustainably long, like they can do a whole day's worth of driving and stuff like that, but not depend entirely on gas. That's one way that they can actually lower their ongoing cost. And we've actually seen that play out in the market. That
we indeed have.
Vast majority of Uber and Lyft drivers and even taxi drivers at this point are all driving at least hybrids, if not full-on electric vehicles. So it's kind of proof of the concept that if you give every individual worker involved, if their only cost is the energy that's going into the system, they are individually incentivized to optimize for their energy use. Most drivers don't necessarily, if you're just using it for going to work, going back, stuff like that, they don't have enough of a direct incentive to optimize, to spend the big capital outlay to buy the more expensive vehicle to lower your ongoing cost, whereas the workers who are working on a unit by unit basis do. And that's basically what proof of work is. It's a relationship between how many hashes I can produce compared to the rest of the network, and thus how much cryptocurrency I can earn. And my only cost, the only thing I can have control over is how much I'm paying for the electricity. And one of the things that I can do to reduce that is by buying a more and more and more efficient miner as they come out. Other things that you can actually do, which is really cool. And so that's kind of the surface level argument that it actually positively impacts the energy use kind of mechanism. But otherwise, there's other things we can do, like take what is otherwise uncaptured energy sources and capture them and turn them into cryptocurrency. And often they're uncaptured because they're too far away from a grid, or it'd be too expensive to connect them to a grid. Obviously, the volcano mining is one example of this, where there's an enormous amount of geothermal potential energy that's coming out of this. And if you just capture it, run it through a steam turbine and plug it into some cryptocurrency miners, it might be too difficult to connect it to a grid and too unstable to connect it to a grid, but you can just put in a big pallet container some cryptocurrency miners, and you directly turn that otherwise lost energy directly into value.
Is that the flared gas one, or is that a separate one?
This is flared gas. That's just, there's natural geothermal energy coming out constantly, and so wherever in the world you happen to have a lot of geothermal, you can use that. We don't have a bunch of volcanoes in the United States. I don't think we have any. We might have that one super volcano in Yosemite. But what we do have is landfills. One of the things that landfills do, in addition to all the other awful stuff that they do, is the way that they work is you put a bunch of garbage together, and then they cover it up with a couple of sheets of plastic and stuff like that, and then they put a bunch of land on top of it, dirt on top of it and stuff like that, and eventually, hopefully, it breaks down over the course of many thousands of years. Who knows? But there's a lot of things breaking down inside of that, and so methane is constantly being created and produced by the whole thing. And if you ever go to a landfill, you can actually see there's these little pipes that are sticking up out of the capped parts, where they're just venting that methane, because if they don't vent it, it will build up in pressure and could explode.
Kaboom.
Could be very bad, right? But just venting methane into the atmosphere, that's the best they've been able to come up with so far, because it just relieves the danger. But that is, in fact, a very heavy gas. It's actually, as this article points out, it's 25 times. I'm sorry. Where's the? Oh, sorry. It's not heavier, but it's 25 times more powerful at trapping heat than carbon dioxide. So it's a much more dangerous element for us to be releasing into the atmosphere. And so there's a lot of different things that vent methane, including, I think what you're referring to is there's in fracking environments and stuff like that. That's one of the side effects, is that there's this methane venting, and often they'll just burn it, right? So that it's not, the methane isn't going into the atmosphere. It's flared, is what they call it. And that at least reduces
sounds super
that,
eco-friendly
right?
too, right?
Exactly. It's not like that's that much better. But in this case, what they do instead is they capture it, put it in a generator, and turn it into electricity, and then send that electricity to a Bitcoin miner. So they have created a market value behind capturing methane, and not just capturing it and flaring it, but literally putting it inside of a generator and turning it as efficiently as possible into energy. I love it.
That's
so this
cool.
company that's doing exactly that has raised $13 million, Nodal Power. I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. It's very, very cool. I want to see more examples of this kind of stuff happening just because I really think that the narrative that proof of work is inherently dangerous to the environment is wrong. It's unnuanced, and there needs to be a lot more nuance to the argument. And in this case, it's not just increasing the efficiency of how we capture energy and stuff like that, but it is in fact giving a reason to capture what would otherwise be going into the atmosphere. And that's huge.
Yeah,
I love
that's
that.
amazing. It's such a great combination of doing something that is, I guess, climate friendly or eco friendly, but doing it in a way that is also economically viable.
Exactly.
It's great.
I love
it's
it.
awesome.
I love it. Yep.
Super smart. And we're not going to get into it on today's show, but the argument about proof of work not being eco-friendly is, I can't even believe, honestly, that at the beginning when you opened that you gave them that much, you gave them that much of the benefit of the doubt, because just no.
It's just a bad argument, to be honest.
No.
Yeah, if you really dig deep into it, it just doesn't make sense. Well, okay, I'm sorry. What's really key is it uses more energy than, say, proof of stake. The big question is that only matters if proof of work and proof of stake achieve the exact same ends. Proof of work very, very simply achieves the end of
here I said we're just not going to get into it today.
You're totally right.
It's too deep.
Where proof of stake might not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Exactly. We should totally do something on it eventually, but you're right.
We should. Let us know in the comments if you want to hear our thoughts.
Please do. Anyway, let's get into the next thing.
All right.
Your
sounds
favorite
good.
subject.
Oh, my goodness. I always have to cover this guy because Craig Wrong is one of my favorite characters in Bitcoin because his follies are just so hilarious.
Favorite villains.
There you go.
He even dresses like one. He literally looks like a supervillain.
Yeah. He's quite the character. So, in the latest, his name is Craig Wright. I call him Craig Wrong because he claims to be Satoshi Nakamoto. And what's so ridiculous about that is if he were, it would be very easy for him to prove. And yet he continues to litigate this issue as if the courts are qualified to decide, and as if deciding through the courts is some sort of meaningful way to prove it when he could just prove it so easily. So, in this case, he sued a group of developers because he claims that they sort of owe him 111,000 Bitcoin. The company says that the documents he is using to say that he's due this are shockingly fabricated. And the real kicker here, though, is that if it were true that these Bitcoin belong to him, he would essentially also then be admitting that he was behind the Mt. Gox hack. So that's the second article about this, if you just scroll down. It is widely accepted in the crypto community that the Bitcoin in the 1FX address originated from a well-publicized hack on a Japanese cryptocurrency exchange that occurred in March of 2014, of course, referring to the Mt. Gox hack. Essentially, it appears that if Dr. Wright is the owner of the Bitcoin in this wallet, he has effectively admitted to being the person who stole 80,000 Bitcoin from Mt. Gox.
Empty Gox.
Sorry.
I like to call it empty Gox since it's empty.
That's funny.
Thank you.
So there's the story. Craig Wrong is gonna wrong, I guess.
Yeah.
They, on that note, actually, last month, a UK court also dismissed one of his lawsuits, alleging that crypto exchanges Coinbase and Kraken infringed on his copyright. Sorry, I can't even get it all the way out. On his copyright to use the name Bitcoin. There is one thing that I want to add to this story, which is that the developers that were sued in this case were able to be defended because of support from the Bitcoin Legal Defense Fund, which is a nonprofit organization that was initially formed with support from Jack Dorsey. And I think that it's just important to call out here because a lot of people think of Bitcoin in particular as this like, no one controls it, and what they fail to understand is that Bitcoin is software at the end of the day, and software must be constantly maintained and upgraded by developers to continue to be useful. Mm-hmm. And so the Bitcoin core developers need support of some kind. Mm-hmm. And because Bitcoin is Bitcoin, they have been able to be supported both through a legal defense fund and, financially, however they're paid, because Bitcoin is Bitcoin. It's the giant. Everybody supports it. It's so much bigger than the rest. But the question for me is, over time, how are we going to see Web3 protocols have developer teams that are supported in similar ways? Bitcoin doesn't have an inherent sort of business model that is able to support these developers. It's just something that's kind of grown up around the ecosystem in an ad hoc way. And I think that we're going to need to figure that out as an industry for these protocols to be maintained over time.
Agreed. Bitcoin might not have a business model, but there are a handful of very valuable businesses built on top of it, like Coinbase, that do. And so I've always assumed that eventually we're going to get to a point where the most valuable companies see the value in keeping a core dev on staff and just saying, like, 2 days a week you work for us, 3 days a week we pay you to work on core dev, because they directly benefit from that core dev, and that's incredibly valuable. I'm surprised we haven't seen that. We've seen it in a few little cases. I think we probably will see it more as there's more adoption on top of fewer and fewer L1s. We're going to see the most valuable companies built on top of those L1s start paying the core developers that maintain them and keep them, working really well and bringing in the money for those companies to do so.
Yeah, that's a great point. The issue then becomes kind of control, because the companies that are paying for those developers are going to then be able to kind of put their thumb on the scale and get what they want moved to the front of the line, influence the direction of development, et cetera.
Like the way I think Google was the one that famously did it, or was it Facebook? I don't remember now, where they had was it a 5% or a 1 day a week or something like that, open source day, where people just get to work on their own projects. So ideally it would be more of we're paying you to be on staff and you spend just a certain number of days working specifically on the underlying core protocol according to the decisions that you and the rest of the core developers in the community make.
That's where it gets tricky, though. Hard to, and I have had friends who work at those kind of companies where supposedly they're able to put 10% of their time into personal projects, and that ends up not really being true, because oftentimes when you're working at that level, you have such demands on how much you're expected to perform that you have to work overtime anyway, and so there ends up not really being that personal time.
Right. So if you want to take that personal time, you're just taking it out of your personal time. It's not really paid company time to be working on open source projects.
It's an issue, and while what you're proposing is a potential solution, I personally hope that we come up with something that is more outside the box than that.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I hope so. We need something for it. So
yeah, for sure.
We'll see. All right. So shifting to DePIN news, we've mentioned this coming for a while now on a handful of episodes. The Akash network, for anyone that isn't familiar already, has been testing for the past few months on testnet their introduction of GPU rentals on their rental market, and specifically the A100 and H100s, basically the top of the line AI training hardware. And all the bugs are worked out, everything's working. They've really battle tested as much as possible, and then they put out a proposal to add that as well as a handful of other things into the next release of mainnet 6. And very quickly, within a day, they do a week of voting. Within a day, it passed, or it will pass, and there was 100% approval. Everyone saying yes, let's do it. So we're looking at, in about a week, Akash will become the only open secondary market to acquire NVIDIA H100s, the most advanced GPUs for AI. So we're looking at it'll happen because something that's happening within a particular blockchain can't happen at a time or a date. It happens on a block, and so that block is estimated to happen on August 31st. So very, very exciting.
So exciting.
I'm curious. Let's. I think we were going to look at the markets, see how they're kind of handling such news. Yeah, let me grab that real quick. Pull up the weekly, and how we looking? Markets. Yes, sir. So it's been a crazy week. I mean, last week was the more crazy week. I think Bitcoin's actually holding steady. Hey, we're above 26. That's great. Ethereum didn't actually dip as much, so that's great. But then in the DePIN sector, Filecoin's down, BitTorrent tokens down. Oh gosh, this morning Akash was up, and now it is down. So there's a lot of, with the biggest news, and this is going to be, we just had yesterday's NVIDIA earnings call, and just everyone's excited about that. And so just, the emergence of AI, and especially where that's going to play into the Web3 space, has a lot of people excited. And yet markets are weird. So what are you going to do? Live Peer's up, great. Theta is up, Render's up. So Render might be taking a little bit more of the benefit of that. But yeah, they're a week away and Akash is down. Sometimes it's like, buy the hype, sell the news. And so there's no news.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like token price is a lagging indicator. And
sometimes.
on that note, actually, right, it can also be just hype, as we were talking about earlier. But I saw this tweet from Girl Gone Crypto that I think just really puts into perspective the potential here for Akash when it comes to what they're doing. So she said, "We spend all day obsessing over crypto, yet the market cap of a single company," how do you say that again? NVIDIA is higher than the entire crypto industry combined. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yes, we're definitely early. She wraps it up with, does this make us smart for being early or just slightly pathetic? It would be easy to feel slightly pathetic as a result of this, but no, definitely very, very early. I mean, obviously, just look at the rest of what we're talking about, that everything that gets hypey and becomes the new killer app has a 1 week to 1 month kind of lifespan before it dies away. And we keep on chasing those kind of things. So I definitely think we're early because there hasn't yet been introduced something that combines the idea of gets attention and has sustainable value. I would say, but this has kind of been our thesis for, I think we wrote an op-ed about this, that AI is that thing. That AI can be really scary when it's centrally controlled. AI can be incredibly empowering when it's personally controlled. And none of us, even with the amazing hardware that Apple's putting in their computers right now, none of us have enough hardware to train our own AI model. Where renting an A100, and you're also not going to spend $20,000 to buy one yourself, and there's so much of a constrained supply that you kind of can't. So the fact that, and I love Akash. I'm stoked that they started working on this really early, but they're not going to be the only ones. Others are going to do the exact same thing, and they're going to enable us to have access to that incredibly exciting emerging new opportunity that is kind of personal AI within your own control. And I'd
Absolutely.
say
it's win-win on both sides because the value that it offers is enormous, access to those kinds of tools, but then also the, I guess, value that it offers in terms of being a part of the upside of that is also just an incredible opportunity. So excited for you guys. Can't wait to see it.
Yes. Yes.
Also in DePIN news this week, we have a tweet from Meson Network. We love Meson. They essentially have built a decentralized CDN network. A CDN network is what all content distributors need. I think it's called a content distribution network, because that's how we're able to stream television, for example. So decentralizing that, creating a decentralized bandwidth exchange is just like an incredibly important piece of the infrastructure stack. It can work alongside something like IPFS or Arweave as the sort of accelerator layer, where if you have the file storage, but the latency involved in getting it to you, or just the retrieval time, all of that could be really slow. And so something like Meson is the answer to get that to you in a way that would be more like a Web2 experience. Mm-hmm. They recently announced that they were part of a incubation program with Sony and I don't know how you say this company's name, A-Star?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So what's cool about this is that I remember when this incubation program was announced back in February, I think we might have covered it. And really the thing here is just that it's exciting to see companies like Sony getting involved in this space, you know, because Sony in particular being kind of at the lower end of the content distributors. I don't know how to articulate
the smallest
that.
Studio.
Smallest studio, yeah. I guess that's the easiest way to say it.
I don't know if they're the smallest, but of the big ones, they probably are for sure.
Yeah. So they have the most to gain, and something like Web3 infrastructure, or not something like it, Web3 infrastructure could give them the competitive advantage to shoot to the top of that list. So that could be really interesting to see as they start to explore these technologies.
Yeah, and they do. So, I mean, Sony's perfect. We have a relationship with someone at Sony, and so we've kind of really liked the idea of them getting involved in this. So it's really exciting to see them really embracing Web3. They've got a working group within the company itself, and they've got this incubation program. They're kind of perfect because they have the full stack. Like you said, they're a studio.
That's a good point.
That has a bunch of IP, and the recent animated Spider-Man movie was theirs. They've got a handful of really great properties that do decently well as far as theatrical. They also have a streaming service, Crackle. They also, I think they still make computers. They might not anymore. I think they might have sold that business unit, but they make cameras. They make kind of everything involved in the entire stack.
I don't know if you would count this as a computer, but they obviously are making gaming consoles.
Exactly. I do. Exactly. I forgot about it. Yeah, totally. Like the PlayStation itself, oftentimes gaming consoles have some of the most powerful GPUs. They don't need much else other than that. They need a hard drive, a disk drive, and a powerful GPU. And unless you're a hardcore gamer, which the majority of the owners of these pieces of hardware are not. In fact, I remember the PlayStation 3, a lot of people bought them specifically because it was the lowest cost Blu-ray player. And so they weren't even gamers, they just really wanted to watch HD movies. But so a whole lot of people that own this hardware, it just sits on their shelf for a lot of the day. And so again, this ties back into Akash. One of the awesome things you could potentially do with that is instead of it just sitting on your shelf doing nothing, it could in fact participate in, say, a rendering network or even a training network or just some other way that could collectively use the resources that are sitting there and pay you for it.
Right. So it's going to pay you for it, and it's also, I guess you could call it greener because it's using resources that already exist rather than creating new ones. So it's going to just be better, faster, cheaper across the board.
When you put a whole bunch of hardware into one space, the heat builds upon itself, and so you have to spend a lot of energy cooling it. You don't have to get a dedicated fan to set next to your PlayStation. It's got one built in, and that's enough. And so it reduces it simply by spreading it out. You spend less energy running the same amount of compute. Very, very cool. So I love that Sony's getting involved. Meson is a really great offering, so I'm stoked. Congratulations to them. And we really want to see other companies as well, but Sony to just take more and more steps and just kind of see how deep this rabbit hole goes.
Absolutely. Meson, let us know what's come out of this for you. We would love to share the news.
Yes.
All right, and taking us to our last DePIN story of the day.
Yes. Sorry, I'm over here. ArDrive has released a mobile app. So for the same reason that someone might use Dropbox or something else, either because you want to have cloud storage of stuff that's on your device, or if you want to actually offload some of the things that you would normally be capturing onto your device onto the cloud, you can do so on the permaweb. Now, you can do it directly onto ArDrive is built on top of the Arweave network, so you can actually put your stuff in a permanent way, and ArDrive actually wraps security around it so that you can have encrypted private files and stuff like that. So you can really just think of this very similar to Google Drive or Dropbox, anything else like that. So now they've released a mobile app, very, very cool. Specifically, it's an Android app. If you go to their site, you can see it's an Android app, but they do have this little button here for install on iOS. And then they, show you exactly how you go about it. I'm guessing this is just kind of because Apple kind of drags their feet a little bit on the approval process of things like this. Who knows if they've actually pushed back and said, no, we won't do it, or if they're just dragging their feet and taking forever. This is about a month old. It's reasonable to see Apple take a month or more to actually approve new iOS apps. It's pretty common, in fact. So it's definitely one of the advantages of the Play Store is that you can get things up a lot faster, a lot easier. But so the point is, there is the ability for you to install it on either Android or iOS. In this case, it's kind of just a web app that you add the icon to your home screen, so it works exactly the same. But very awesome, very exciting. I haven't installed it yet myself, but I will be, because I love the overall Arweave community, the ArDrive specific platform itself, and I would definitely like a little bit more storage on my device and not have to depend on a centralized cloud.
Right?
So,
yeah. Congrats, guys.
Very
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very well done.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to our policy and regulatory section. We had a sad week. I would say this is the other top story of the week, the one that everyone was talking about and really bemoaning the news.
Yep.
So you want to take us into it?
Yeah. So they have arrested one of the founders of TornadoCash, and they are seeking the other one. So they're named Roman Storm and Roman Semenov. So a lot of people are shortening it to the arrest of Storm, and I'm like, Storm? What does that have to do with? Are they like simplifying TornadoCash? It's the guy's name. So if anyone else had that same confusion as I did, so this basically is an escalation to what was happening last year? Yeah, where they're basically just directly accusing them of facilitating the abuse of this system that North Korean hackers did. It's tough because some people are interpreting this to say, yeah, they're right about this. They took specific steps in order to support it. They knew what they were doing. They were helping this process happen, helping the laundering of $600 million happen, etc. But it's long been the case that writing code is not criminal activity, or rather that if someone uses code you've written to conduct criminal activity, you can't be held accountable for that.
Right. Most people would say that code is speech.
Well, code is speech, yes. And that's definitely the case. Code is either speech or it's money, one way or the other, kind of thing. And those are definitely protected. It seems like they're very much Treasury is kind of twisting the interpretation of things in order to try to claim that they're doing something active. Like let me see if I have the list here. They paid for web hosting services, and they paid for a software repository. Before it was released, they had complete control of the TornadoCash smart contracts. So honestly, this is built on really shaky ground here. Like the fact that they had to kind of specify that before a certain date they had complete control. What that means is it's just like before you release software, you have complete control over it, especially if it's open source software and you're going to let other people have contributions into it afterwards. You give up some of that complete control, but while you're developing it, you have complete control. So the implication of this, if they're found guilty, is that if someone else abuses the software that you release, because you at some point marketed it and hosted it and had control over it while you were writing, that you can be held liable for that. And I really don't see that happening. Like that's way out, way beyond the pale. And they specifically even say, this is according to the 2019 FinCEN virtual currency guidance, an anonymizing software provider is not a money transmitter. And being a money transmitter, the act of being a money transmitter is what's key here. And they never were. They supplied the tools, and it specifically says the suppliers of tools are not the same thing. They're not money transmitters. So they're very much kind of stretching stuff to try to pretend like this is something real that really isn't, honestly. And the community's obviously quite upset about it. We've got Coin Center over here sharing their take. We'll have that in the show notes. It's a great rundown. Ryan C. Adams really just takes them, to task. Like, this is scary. Like, okay, so if illegal activity happens over the web, why aren't they arresting Sir Tim Berners-Lee? Or the makers of HTTPS that made it secure?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So there's kind of two things that happened though with the TornadoCash issue this week. There's the arrest of the developers, which you've been talking about. But secondarily, a judge ruled that TornadoCash was a sanctionable entity. Mm-hmm. And it said that its founders, its developers, and its DAO made up this sanctionable entity. And I think that that's a kind of a separate aspect of this case, because there's been so much confusion mm-hmm. about where a DAO, what entity a DAO is, and really how it can be, how it either fits into existing structures, how it fits outside of them and might need new regulation, that kind of thing. And so it's concerning for the future of the industry for a DAO to be considered a sanctionable entity in this way, because the idea is that it's autonomous and it's making decisions in a different way than an entity controlled by certain people. So,
yeah. I don't know. We'll see how this plays out. I hope that the courts take a really honest, deep understanding as best as they can of things, and don't just treat this as like, well, this is causing the state to lose power, so panic and do whatever you can to fight it. Because that's kind of the way people are seeing it. That this is kind of summarized in Ryan Adams' tweet here. They will not permit an HTTPS for money. And what's key here is privacy is normal, I think, is the line that is going around the industry, and it is. It absolutely is. Just because we've kind of gotten used to in the post-Patriot Act days that they can surveil anything, and they should surveil anything, and the assumption should be that if you're doing something privately, you're breaking the law. Well, that's unconstitutional. You need to give someone the assumption of privacy, and if you see evidence that they are breaking the law, and wanting to protect their own privacy is not considered evidence of breaking the law. Legally, it's not supposed to, at least.
Right. The people that say, oh, well, I'm not doing anything illegal, so I don't care if they can tell what I'm doing. Here's the thing. That's a terrible position to have, but also I don't believe you.
Yeah.
There's sometimes that I want to have a private conversation with my husband just because I need to vent about something that I don't want other people to hear. Right. And I'll get nervous texting about it because what if that's actually not private? What if that ends up coming out, being leaked? Yeah. There isn't a private way to have a conversation virtually right now. There are some attempts at it, and they often still make me nervous. Yeah. And so privacy is normal. Absolutely. That's Zcash's motto these days. And I think that the major danger around TornadoCash is simply that it will make you will have to be forced to become an outlaw if you are a software developer, or move somewhere that you have, to a friendly regulatory environment. Yeah. And that's just really, really terrifying when it comes to the future of Web3.
Well, speaking of friendly regulatory environments.
Yes, hopping over to our last policy story this week, and that is that Thailand's new pro-crypto prime minister he won the election, this gentleman, and he ran with one of his main campaign platforms being a promise of a national airdrop where every Thai citizen would receive basically $300 through this airdrop. Everyone 16 years of age or older. But the kicker is that the funds can only be spent within 4 kilometers of their home. I think that's just an odd detail.
Interesting.
Yeah. I wonder what the thinking is behind that detail.
Build up your local economy.
Yeah.
Don't send it overseas,
I guess. Of course, there are critics of this because of its sheer cost, estimated to be $14.3 billion. And then also just like the kind of like why blockchain question, because there already are existing digital banking infrastructure in Thailand. And so using a blockchain maybe seems unnecessary to some of the critics. I would say, right, exactly, because digital infrastructure doesn't mean that it can't
so
easily be controlled.
Exactly.
And so that would be the answer to why blockchain, for sure. But nonetheless, Thailand has been doing a bunch of different things to support the crypto industry to be pro blockchain. They are also offering a $1 billion tax break for firms that are issuing investment tokens, as Thai entities.
That's huge.
So there's just like, it's definitely one of those markets that's trying to pull the industry in, to be attractive to the industry, and this is a kind of like a fun way to do it. It's odd to me that he was like allowed to run on the sort of like, I'm going to bribe you, right?
Good point. Yeah.
Like you can't do that here. You can't say like, well, elect me and I'm going to just send you some cash.
Basically taxpayer money. I mean, where does the source of funds come from? If you're creating a new token, you don't need to put $14 billion behind it to make it necessarily.
I think it's just.
But you want to put something behind it, otherwise it's value would drop to
air.
nil. So.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
Very curious.
Yeah. Vendors will be able to convert it to cash at designated banks. So somehow there's something connected there.
Yeah,
I don't know.
So something's backing it.
Yeah. Interesting stuff.
Fair enough. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, that's the week's news. Yeah. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We encourage you to find us on various socials. We're at Web3WG, obviously, if you're watching it on YouTube. Also on X and on all the other socials.
I'm personally at Amy of Alexandria.
And I am Devon R. James on Twitter. And everyone have a fantastic weekend and a great week, and we will see you next week.
Let us know in the comments if you want to have us cover any stories next week.
Yes.